Call to order. August 10th, 2017, meeting of the Indian River County Planning and Zoning Commission. First order of business, the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. David.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Next order of business, is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Anybody? Additions or deletions?
The staff has none.
Okay. Next order of business, approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve by Dr. Day, seconded by Mr. Landers. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous. Next order of business is the consent agenda. SBS subdivision, Schulke Biddle Stoddard LLC, request for preliminary plat approval for a two-lot industrial subdivision known as SBS subdivision, Schulke Biddle Stoddard LLC, owner agent, location on the north side of 12th Street between Old Dixie Highway and FEC Railroad, zoning district IG, general industrial, land use designation CI, commercial industrial. This matter is quasi-judicial. Has anybody had any ex parte communications? None? None. Okay, at this moment, I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a consent item, so we would be available to answer any questions, but we don't have a presentation.
Okay. So can I get a motion, gentlemen?
I move to approve with staff's recommendations.
Second.
Motion to approve by Dr. Day, second by Mr. Jordan. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous? Okay. Next order of business is a public hearing. Vero Beach Square, request to rezone approximately 9.66 acres from CL Limited Commercial to PD Plan Development and to obtain a conceptual PD plan concurrency preliminary PD plat approval for the project to be known as Vero Beach Square, consisting of a 110-room hotel and 4 standalone commercial buildings. The site is located at 5125 20th Street, SR 60, and lies on the south side of SR 60 between the existing Applebee's restaurant and the existing Sonny's Barbecue restaurant. Vero Capital LLC owner, Conover Acquisitions Corporation is the applicant, Kimberly Horn and Associates Inc. are the agent. Zoning is CL Limited Commercial, land use designation CI Commercial Industrial. This matter is quasi-judicial. Has anybody had any ex parte communications? No? At this time, anybody like to speak on this matter, please stand and be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay. At this time, we'll turn it over to staff.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. For the record, I am Ryan Sweeney, Senior Planner with the Current Development Section of the Community Development Department. Tonight we have a request for a PD rezoning and conceptual and preliminary PD plan approval for Vero Beach Square plan development. Briefly, the PD or plan development rezoning process involves the PD rezoning and conceptual PD plan approval, which is a recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission and ultimately approval by the board, as well as a preliminary PD plan / plat approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission, subject to approval by the board of the conceptual and PD rezoning. The third step is the land development permit or land development permit waiver, and the final step is the final PD plan plat by the board. Tonight, the applicant is requesting concurrent approval of both the PD rezoning and conceptual PD plan, as well as the preliminary PD plan. The subject site is located on the south side of State Road 60, about mid-block between 43rd Avenue and 58th Avenue, and is immediately between the Sonny's Barbecue to the east and Applebee's to the west. Further to the west is Walmart and ultimately Sam's, and then 58th Avenue. This slide depicts the overall aerial showing the existing conditions of the subject site, as well as the surrounding conditions of the sites and built environment along State Road 60. The comprehensive land use designation for the subject site, as well as all of the properties on the south side of State Road 60 between 43rd Avenue and 58th Avenue, is C/I, commercial/industrial. The residential properties to the north on the north side of State Road 60 are L2, low density residential 2. And the properties to the south across the main relief canal, excuse me, are L1, low density residential -1. The proposed development, the reason for the PD request is simply to add 2 additional uses to what would be the underlying CO limited commercial zoning district, a tire store, tire shop, and a drive-through restaurant. Sit-down restaurants without drive-throughs are permitted use. Tire stores are not a permitted use, they're administrative permit use, but this PD rezoning request would essentially keep all the uses permitted in the CL limited commercial zoning district and add these 2 uses as permitted uses. The development itself, the overall site size is 9.66 acres, and there are a total of 5 buildings proposed: a 110-room hotel, a multi-tenant strip building that is a little over 11,000 square feet, a standalone restaurant building a little over 5,000 square feet, a standalone fast food restaurant at 3,500 square feet, and a tire store at just under 7,000 square feet. Here is a copy of the conceptual preliminary PD plan. Moving west to east is the standalone fast food restaurant with drive-through, the standalone sit-down restaurant with a small covered outdoor seating area, the multi-tenant strip building that has a mixture of restaurant, retail, as well as another drive-through restaurant at the end that's most likely a coffee or donut shop on the end here. Tire store is the easternmost building, and then along the south is the 3-story 110-room hotel with a pool and pool deck and a basketball/tennis court. And then you have your stormwater areas here along the southernmost portion of the property. And again, here's an aerial overlay showing how the proposed plan fits into the existing built-out environment along the south side of State Road 60 here. The proposed phasing plan, as laid out in your staff report, essentially all of the common area infrastructure, the driveway connection to State Road 60, the driveway connections to the properties to the east and west, the stormwater, and most of the parking in the northeast corner, as well as the tire shop and the multi-tenant commercial building is proposed as phase 1. Phase 2 is the hotel building with the parking immediately north of the hotel building. And phase 3 is the standalone sit-down restaurant as well as the standalone fast food restaurant. The landscape plan and required buffering, the LDRs require a type B buffer with 6-foot opaque feature provided along the south property line, ultimately because the properties across the canal are zoned RS2 and have an L1 land use designation. The properties on the north side require a type B buffer and a 4-foot opaque feature, which is a State Road 60 requirement. There's also internal landscape requirements, including parking area requirements and some perimeter between the commercial sites. The traffic circulation plan, which shows the proposed driveway connection to State Road 60, which would be a right-in, right-out, and accompanied by a right turn lane into the site off of State Road 60. And again, the driveway connection to Sonny's to the east and Applebee's to the west, and ultimately through the Applebee's parking lot and to the Walmart driveway, aka 53rd Avenue, which is the signalized intersection with State Road 60. Outlined in staff's report, and on the next slide we'll go over the dedications, improvements, and conditions, but one of those recommended items was lengthening of the northbound left turn lane on the Walmart driveway, aka 53rd Avenue. The existing left turn lane condition is shown here in blue. The proposed extension would take it to essentially the next driveway cut for Applebee's and ultimately be equivalent to the east-west driveway connection for Walmart and Applebee's, and also all the way through to the proposed site. As alluded to, the dedications, improvements, and conditions for this project include the westbound left turn lane on State Road 60 at 53rd Avenue. There's an existing left turn lane, but the traffic impact study did require extending that turn lane. Also, a eastbound left turn lane where there's an existing median cut on State Road 60 south of the Advanced Auto Parts, a little bit east of the project site. That turn lane will be extended as well to facilitate U-turn movements if folks are not going out at the signalized intersection. Eastbound right turn lane on State Road 60 and right-of-way dedication at the project driveway entrance. And again, the northbound left turn lane that we just discussed. Because the underlying property is actually owned by Walmart, it's not a public right-of-way. There's also a discussion in the staff report about providing the ability to provide a 2-year construction bond if Walmart, A, is not quick to respond, or B, decides it's not an improvement they want to move forward with. There is an external sidewalk existing on State Road 60. However, that sidewalk will need to be adjusted in order to accommodate the right turn into the site. Internal sidewalks as shown on the conceptual plan, and a recorded access easement with Walmart to ensure that adequate legal access is provided for this project through the Applebee's property, which is an existing easement, and ultimately to the Walmart driveway / 53rd Avenue. Real quick, as I showed before, the stormwater plan proposes the wet stormwater pond along the southeast quarter of the site and a dry stormwater area southwest quarter of the site immediately behind the hotel. Environmental issues, there are no uplands on the site. There are also no wetlands on the site. There are a good number of trees. Staff did meet with the applicants and their consultants and identified ultimately a healthy 42-inch live oak that is going to be preserved in place on site. That would be a real bonus, if you will, to the site, as well as 7 additional healthy oak trees, laurels, and live oaks that will be relocated to the south landscape buffer, thereby providing a mature buffer as soon as the project comes out of the ground. Also, about 50 of the 150 total cabbage palms will be relocated throughout the project. Any mitigation will be required for any removal of any remaining protected trees or cabbage palms. I'll run through the elevations just real quick because there's a total of 5 of them. This is the proposed design for the 110-room hotel. It is 3 stories. This is the front, rear, and the 2 sides. The multi-tenant strip building, which includes, again, an assortment of uses, retail portion, possible restaurant uses, as well as what could be fast food or a coffee shop on the end with drive-through. The proposed design for the standalone restaurant, there's, again, a little covered outdoor seating area on one side of the building. The standalone fast food with drive-through. And lastly, the tire store. Public benefits. For planned developments, public benefits are required to offset either waivers, which they're not requesting any waivers, but in this case, just the PD rezoning uses that they're adding through the PD process. And those public benefits include, again, the enhanced tree preservation, as I discussed earlier. The applicant has also agreed to extend the westbound left turn lane into the Walmart site over and above the minimum that the traffic study identified. They're adding about, I believe it's 2 or 3 additional car lengths to be accommodated into that turn lane. That's obviously a busy turning movement everybody's probably familiar with. As well as that eastbound left turn lane, that U-turn extension south of Advance. Not only will that serve folks using this project, but that will be a true public benefit for any motoring public making that turning movement. And with that, staff's recommendation that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve the preliminary PD plan subject to board approval, and recommend that the BCC approve the PD rezoning and conceptual PD plan for Vero Beach Square with conditions listed in staff's report. And real quick, those include final architectural plans, the recorded Walmart easement, final tree mitigation plans, turn lane extensions on State Road 60, the turn lane on State Road 60 at the project entrance, the turn lane extension on the Walmart driveway or bond out option, and installing all required improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Gentlemen, do you have any questions of staff?
I do, but I'd like to withhold until we hear from the applicant.
Okay. So, okay, no questions at this time. I'm going to open up the public hearing. If anybody would like to come forward and speak, please do now.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Holland, Kimley Horn Associates, 445 24th Street, Vero Beach, Florida. I concur with staff. They've been a great help to get us to this point so far, and we've reviewed the staff report, recognized the conditions, and concur with them. So we're here to answer any of your questions.
Commissioners have any questions you'd like to ask Mr. Holland? Okay, none? Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Would anybody else like to come forward and speak?
I'd like to see
Please.
the plan again.
Please come forward.
I said, I would like to see the plan again, which shows the landscaping that you're going to put up as a buffer. We're
Ma'am, for the record, we need to have your name and address.
Barbara Randolph, 5220 Rosewood Lane, Vero Beach, Florida.
Thank you, Mrs. Randolph.
I would just like to see what kind of a buffer is going to be placed there. We listen to Walmart and Sam's beep beep trucks early in the morning and late at night. I don't think that's going to be the issue, but we would like to make sure that we have the privacy that we now have and how that's going to be protected. You briefly put the plan up there, and I'm assuming that's the canal on the bottom. Is that correct?
Please.
Correct, Mr. Chair. Ma'am, yes, so the canal right-of-way actually is not completely shown, but you can see where the label is here, Indian River Farms Main Relief Canal.
Okay.
So there, again, that's a 300-foot wide canal right-of-way, about 100 feet of bank on this side, about 100 feet of canal width, and then about 100 feet of bank on the other side, on your side in
So
Rosewood.
where you have it painted green
Correct.
is where the shrubs are going to be?
Right, so that's a 25-foot landscape buffer with a 6-foot opaque feature. In this case, is proposed to be a solid precast block wall system. There will be trees and shrubs and understory trees within that buffer. Then you have, again, the dry stormwater area here, a wet stormwater area here, and the hotel starts here.
Okay, great.
Okay?
Thank you.
So it's a
Appreciate it.
6-foot wall,
Right,
a
Correct.
sound-absorbing wall.
right.
And then on what side of the wall is the vegetative buffer?
Mr. Chair, Dr. Day, they're on both sides. Some of the larger trees are on the inside to afford them some room for their roots. The understory trees and shrubs would be on the outside. There may be some canopy trees on the outside as well, but they're sort of staggered on both sides.
So it's a solid wall plus buffer, vegetative buffer on both sides?
Correct.
So one of the questions that I had is, it appears that Walmart has their buffer, but then it's all been cleared out from there to the canal. Is that representative of what we're going to see, or is that existing landscaping going to be pretty much kept in addition to?
And for the record, John McCoy, and that shows on the aerial, and I'm going to speak from recollection here. It's my recollection that Walmart needed to construct a utility line within the Indian River Farms Water Control District right away, and as part of that permitting through the Indian River Farms had them remove the vegetation. I think as long as the applicant's not required to go in there, I don't believe they'll be required to remove that, but that is a separate permitting jurisdiction that has control over that right-of-way. The applicant may be able to confirm that to date that is not a requirement of the Indian River Farms.
Mr. Holland, could you respond to that, please?
Well, I'd like to do two things. I'll confirm with Indian River Farms Water Control District, David Gunter, he's the chairman over there. To speak to your point on landscaping along the south side, Walmart and Sam's have their loading areas where you are hearing trucks on the south side of the property. This project doesn't propose any loading or even vehicular use area to the south of the buildings. And then as a point, working with staff, the tree relocations that we identified on the site, those where code would normally require 14 or 16 foot tall trees, you're getting 20, 25 foot tall mature live oaks and laurel oaks along the entire south buffer.
Yeah, very pleased to hear that. Thank you.
No problem.
Curtis Randolph is my wife. We live at 5220 Rosewood. One thing I was worried about is the tire shop noise. Is that going, the tire shop is where could you show that tire shop again? Is it going to be closer to 60?
Correct, Mr. Chair, Mr. Randolph. The easternmost rectangular building is the proposed tire shop location.
Okay.
It's
So that's going to be east of us.
Yeah, because give or take, yeah. I mean, I don't know where you are within Rosewood, but yes.
But we're going to be right behind the hotel.
Okay, fair enough.
And there's this back here is the pool, and you said a basketball court.
Yeah, basketball, tennis court. And
Is that going to be open all night for basketball, or is there a time restriction on that?
I'm not aware of the hours of the amenity facility.
Because that can get pretty noisy, you know?
Mr. Randolph, if experience is anything as far as when I've stayed in a hotel, usually the hotel folks like to have it quiet for their guests, and they're much closer to the basketball courts and the swimming pool than you are. And if that buffer doesn't have to be cleared,
Okay,
I don't
because
think
it mostly consists of pepper trees and everything else right now. I know that was cleared, because when they mow that, they only come down on the the north side of the canal of Walmart. They only come down so far, and then it's pepper trees and palms and everything right to the edge of the canal there. So, am I understanding right? You're not going to remove that?
It's my understanding that it's not going to be removed.
Okay.
We'll double check with Mr. Gunter on that. And again, experience teaches me that if Mr. Gunter doesn't have to clear any right-of-way that he then has to mow, he's not going to do it. So I would anticipate that that's just going to be exactly as it is right now.
Yeah. And these gentlemen answered a question prior about the lighting. And I was concerned, my only concern was, and from the looks of it, it's not going to be concerned, because I thought there might be some type of high-masted lighting on the back that would be, and the gentleman said that they would put reflectors to keep that from shining across. Yeah, okay. Okay.
Correct. Once again, John McCoy with the County Planning
All
Department.
right, thank you.
Mr. Holland.
Our lighting code does require 90-degree cutoff, and that the source of illumination not be visible from off-site. So any of the lighting on the rear would certainly need to be screened and shielded. And sometime we get to the point of even post-CO adjustments if we realize that there is a source of illumination that is visible.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to come forward and speak? With that, I close the public hearing. Gentlemen, do you have any further questions of staff? No questions?
No,
Okay, Mr. Landers.
questions regarding the drive-throughs. It appears that there's 2 additional drive-throughs in addition to the Sonny's drive-through, correct? Proposed.
Correct, Mr. Chair, Mr. Landers. The Sonny's is entirely different.
Understand.
Yes,
But they're
there's a
gonna
total of
use-
2 drive-throughs
But
on
they
this.
will be using the Sonny's access point to some degree.
Yeah, although they do have a full, well, not a full, but they do have their own right in, right out. Yeah, they don't have a median cut, so to that end, if folks are coming from the east, they may snake in through Sonny's to get into the site.
And Sonny's doesn't have a decel lane, but thankfully, this project is looking at a decel lane, correct?
Correct, on the eastbound, yes.
On the eastbound. Because I know that coming out of that Sonny's, and unfortunately I probably go there more than I should, but I enjoy it.
They have
Too much.
two driveways.
But, you know, to access that and head west, you've got to use that U-turn, which is a concern.
Right.
And now we're adding to that U-turn.
Well, again, Mr. Chair, Mr. Landers, under this scenario, I mean, it'd be quite, actually, it's not too bad. If you were leaving Sonny's and ultimately want to go westbound, you essentially have a uninterrupted driveway that goes through this project to that Walmart driveway. You do have, you know, there's only some parking spaces that back into that driveway, but the intent was to have good east-west and north-south protected driveways through this site. So ultimately, yeah, you could get from Sonny's through the site, through Applebee's, and to that signalized intersection. Otherwise, you can also use the new extended turn lane to make that U-turn movement.
And one of my concerns was the noise from the tire store, but they generally shut down fairly early as well. They're not going to be open 24 hours a day, similar to Walmart. So, why did Sonny's not have to have a decel lane? I know it's not something we could.
Correct. And again, once again, if memory serves, based just on the trip volumes and threshold and peak hour maneuvers, the Sonny's by itself wasn't large enough to trip the turn lane thresholds. The the cumulative number of trips on this site with the number of uses is sufficient to trip that threshold
For this project?
for this project.
But not retroactively for Sunny?
Correct, and Sunny's is a separate correct. We couldn't go back to
Because
Sunny's.
that is that access point, whether it's to this project or that project, or egress from it, is interesting sometimes when people are doing 45 and 55 and decide to stop. The requirement for Walmart, the Walmart access, and that's either going to be done at the end of the project or there's an agreement for a bond?
Correct, and the applicant can probably shed a little bit more light on this, but it is a sort of an either-or, because it is subject to the agreement of a third party.
Mr. Holland, would you mind coming up and addressing that?
Yeah, the Walmart driveway south of the intersection, signalized intersection of 53rd and State Road 60 is somewhat tricky because it's not under my client's ownership. In order to do the turn lane extension as identified in the studies, it's going to take buy-in from the property owner, at least Walmart and potentially Applebee's as well. We've contacted both of those entities and had mixed results in getting their buy-in to do this improvement. So we had a specific meeting with staff, Public Works, Planning, Zoning, to discuss alternatives and options, and we developed this mix of public benefits to help offset that in the event that the 53rd Avenue or the Walmart driveway improvement becomes unattainable.
Okay, so basically there's mechanisms in place. If you can't obtain the property, they'll do something else to...
Correct, they'll do another improvement to mitigate for that.
And what would that be?
And that's the turn lane extension that's the U-turn lane extension. The thought being, Mr. Chair, Mr. Landers, is if folks can't get or decide not to use the signalized intersection, that at least there will be more room afforded to them on 60 to make that U-turn movement. That's sort of a mitigating project. But also we have the other reason for the 2-year construction bond is that once Walmart actually feels, in theory, the impacts of any additional trips, they may say, okay, you're right, we do want this improvement, then we still have an extra window. And that's 2 years from the CO of the hotel. So there will be other project traffic already on the Walmart driveway. So again, they may feel that it is appropriate.
So the eastbound State Road 60 U-turn is not a given then?
No, yes, that is a given. Yeah, that will be provided either way. The one that's not a given is the Walmart driveway because it's not a public right-of-way. It's
the applicant has went ahead and made the commitment that they would build or attempt to attain a permit from FDOT to extend the eastbound turn lane south of Advanced Auto Parts, no matter what happens relative to the 53rd Avenue roadway or driveway improvements.
Attempt to obtain?
Well, I think that's legal speak in case DOT for some reason wouldn't give me a permit, but there's no reason that they would.
State Road 60 is a state-regulated road, so they have to not only meet our standards, but also Florida Department of Transportation. And I wouldn't see why FDOT would not go along with something that's going to move traffic more smoothly through the area.
And then, having sat on the State Road 60 task force a long time ago, the landscaping on State Road 60, can you give a representation of what that is? And I mean, is it a berming? Is it just landscaping, or how is that?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Landers. It's generally equivalent to your existing State Road 60 buffer requirements along Walmart and Applebee's and all of those items. As far as a berm, there may be a subtle berm just to...
I think it's mostly crepe myrtles and 2 to 3 foot high hedge material.
Right, but I'm talking about the
berm,
the elevation. Does it come up and then go back down?
On our site, on the property side, yeah, it's elevated by 18 inches, 2 feet above the road. You know, when you go into Sunny's, you kind of ramp up a little bit. Ours will be similar to that. Probably not as extensive since our buildings are pushed slightly further back than Sunny's, but similar.
fairly consistent with everything you see on 60 now.
Right. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Landers, in addition, it's actually 5 feet wider. The typical State Road 60 buffer is 20 feet, and this is a 25, due in part to the residential zoning on the north side.
Thank you. Mr. Landers?
Nothing more at this time.
I've got to follow up on Mr. Lander's question about the right-in, right-out option. So that requires a person that is trying to maneuver, or do that right-out maneuver and wants to do a U-turn to cross 3 lanes of traffic to get to that
Sure.
U-turn. Is there a formula that tells you how far from the exit point that U-turn has to be in order to make it safe to do that maneuver?
Mr. Chair, Dr. Day, you're starting to get into traffic engineering principles, but the turn lane extension, the U-turn lane extension, is not the immediate first median cut. That would require the driver to try to make it across 3 lanes of traffic right away. It's a pretty short distance. It's actually the next median cut. It's the last one before the bridge across the main relief canal.
And how far is that?
It's a few hundred feet to the east. I don't know the exact dimensions, but it's not immediately across the driveway from this side.
Yeah.
We accounted for that when we looked. There's 2 median cuts east of this project. One is essentially immediately east, and the second one is quite a bit further.
And that's not going to be a U-turn option?
Oh, well, not for this project.
I believe you can make a U-turn there, but where the lengthening is occurring is the U-turn possibility that's furthest east to allow for motorists to do exactly what you're saying, have as much opportunity before they get to the bridge to get to the furthest outbound lane and get into the U-turn lane. So it's pushed as far east as it can without becoming more inconvenient, getting across the bridge and getting to the intersection.
So to clarify, the extension for the U-turn is the farthest east U-turn, not the one to the west side of Sunny's?
Correct. It's not the one that is sort of immediately in front of what was Rex, maybe now Aaron's and Sunny's.
I know it's small, Mr. Chair, Mr. Landers. Where my cursor is now is the first median cut, which is again almost immediately north of Sunny's, and what used to be Rex is now Aaron's. The one we're talking about is the second median cut, immediately south of Advanced Auto, right before the bridge. So again, it gives drivers opportunity to make that right, work their way gradually across the 3 lanes, and then ultimately get into the turn lane. I can't promise that some folks won't try to dart across, but ultimately, hopefully they'll go to the signalized intersection as well for westbound movement.
And that second one is the extended.
Correct.
Yep.
Well, and to the east of that one, though, is the bridge over there, and that, just from personal experience, that's a concern. Why wouldn't they just have the western U-turn extended, which would make more sense for this particular site?
Well,
Again,
that would force the folks to try to cross those 3 lanes right away to get into that. I don't. Maybe perhaps if I have the aerial overlay, if you look at where, let's see here. If you look at where the proposed, where the proposed driveway is for the project and that first median cut, it's only a few hundred feet before. I mean, you essentially would have to cross all 3 lanes to get into that, to start to enter into that turn lane, as opposed to several hundred more feet to get into the extended.
For scale, our property is around 660 feet wide, so I think you'd have approximately 600 feet to make a right out of our right-in, right-out driveway and get to 50th Avenue. You would have an additional at least 600 feet to get to the next eastbound left turn, U-turn movement. So you would essentially double your time and distance to get to the most northerly eastbound lane.
I understand the theory. I just also believe the practicality, and knowing the people that are coming, the people coming out of Sunny's are not going further east to do the U-turn. They're coming out and they're a closer shot as well, because that U-turn closest to that bridge is not a safe U-turn. But that's my concern.
Sure. Mr. Chair, Mr. Landers, one other thing, well, that 43rd and 60 should ultimately be improved as well at that intersection, which is probably the one where folks who are not familiar with the area will go all the way to the intersection before making their U-turn, which would probably be the hotel folks.
So during low volume times, then that 50th Avenue U-turn will likely be utilized. During high volume, heck, you might end up going all the way to Vero before you can make your U-turn.
You may just not go west. You'll just. But again, regardless of the turn lane extension on the Walmart driveway, there's going to be a connection through Applebee's to that driveway.
And that's a light.
Correct. Yeah, that's the signalized intersection. So whether or not the left turn lane is lengthened or extended to accommodate additional folks in that in the left turn only lane, that you can get from this project to that signalized intersection as soon as the project comes online. So hopefully most locals will go to that intersection if they're going westbound.
Anything further, gentlemen? At this time, what's your pleasure, gentlemen? Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve with staff's recommendations.
I'll second that.
Motion to approve by Mr. Jordan, seconded by Mr. Day. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It's unanimous. Next order of business is Commissioners' Matters. Anything, gentlemen? No? Planning matters?
One item, we will have an August 24th meeting. We do have a land development regulation amendment advertised for that meeting, so there will be a meeting.
Thank you, sir. Attorney's matters?
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Meeting is adjourned.